Hey everyone, this is Ken Klippenstein. I'm an investigative reporter with TYT Investigates. I'm here to talk about a story we broke based on an internal study conducted by a media aggregating company that found that a number of interesting things. But one thing was that Joe Biden's news coverage appears to far and away outstrip every other candidate. So I found that and other aspects of the study interesting. Just starting out here, the name of the study is it was conducted by a news aggregator called SmartNews. It's an app that you can get on your phone, kind of like Google News or Apple News. If you can read about it online, it's not a small app. It's a fairly successful app with gets millions of views and so on. But the name of the study was called the Democratic Analysis Year to Date 2019. As I said, not the most exciting name as study names go, but it's the content that's interesting. And what the content shows, and I linked to it in the description of the video, was that Biden, the number of news articles, the way they define if a news article is about a specific candidate, they define it by if their name is in the headline. So the number of articles with Joe Biden's name in the headline in the first half of June was twice that of Elizabeth Warren, over 2,500 articles with Biden's name in the headline. And then that's about quadruple the number of news articles with Bernie Sanders' name in the headline. It seems interesting, given that um, you know, uh, these candidates appear to be relatively popular, Sanders and Warren. I would be surprised if that's reflective. I mean, certainly Biden is leading in the polls now, but I don't know if that's reflective of say that he's four times as popular as Bernie Sanders. The polling seems to suggest that he's certainly doing better, but not just leagues away like that. And what's interesting is I'm looking at the charts now, so forgive me for looking down, but if you look at May, it's market as well. Again, twice that of Warren, and a little more than twice that of Sanders. Going all the way back to April is when Biden's coverage just explodes. In April, it was what's interesting. He didn't Biden doesn't announce until the end of April, and despite that fact, he still has twice as many articles about himself um, as any other, as the three candidates that are virtually locked in second place: Sanders, Warren, and let's see who's the last, or O'Rourke in this, or Warren in this. Yeah, Sanders, Warren, and Buttigieg. But I found that interesting because he hadn't announced until I think the 26th, and already he has all this coverage. Of course, it's natural to get a lot of coverage when you first announce, but to outstrip every other candidate like that, that seems pretty wild. And prior to that, all of Biden's coverage had been um, you know certainly not in first place, in the same ballpark. But once he announces, boom, it just explodes, and everyone else is far behind him, and they don't seem to be gaining at all. At least, I mean, of course, it's early on. I don't want to get into horse race stuff, and I'm not a statistician, but I mean, just looking at the figures, and again, you guys can look at the link in the article description. It's just incredible the amount of relative coverage that he gets. Another interesting thing. So putting Biden aside for a moment here, another interesting aspect of this is the fact that Buttigieg actually um, w- polls roughly the same as Sanders and Warren in both April and May, and it's not until this month that Warren pulls ahead. So Warren has twice as many articles as Buttigieg, but in June, and the data that I cite is for the first half of June. Biden is basically, or I'm sorry, Sanders is basically tied with Buttigieg, and that also doesn't seem reflective of the polling that we see. Certainly, Buttigieg has done not badly, but I don't think you can say that he's polled the same as Sanders. And then if you look at preceding months, the differences are even more marked. So in May, the number of articles about Buttigieg are about the same as Warren and Sanders, and then in April, again about the same as Warren and Sanders. And I don't believe that. I mean, it's not a matter of opinion. You can look at the polling. Buttigieg had not polled as well as Sanders, and I don't think as well as Warren in that time period. So that seems a little lopsided. I should note that just the number of articles doesn't necessarily mean that it's good coverage. So I don't want I want to be fair here. Those would include negative articles, neutral articles, positive articles. But I think it still does reflect a kind of, this notion that this candidate is serious or this one isn't because we're going to cover him. And what's interesting, so you look at the number of articles about the different candidates, and so other than those three or four, Biden, Sanders, Warren, and Buttigieg, everyone else is like at the bottom. Like they're, I mean, no one else gets it, garners really much coverage at all. And I don't know, make of that what you will, but it's still the beginning of the primary. I do wish that there wasn't this horse race game. Boom! Someone just said boom. I think you have the wrong brother here. I don't know if those. I don't know if the Krasensteins are YouTube guys. They seem more of certainly they were Twitter guys, but they seem more at home on Facebook Live, I would say. So check them out there. But yeah, looking at the polling, it's just incredible how little I think that this is a product of just this horrible process of saying, this candidate is they're serious. These are the real guys, and the rest are just kind of, there's always this analysis. They're running for just to raise money or to raise their visibility. But I don't know that that's the media's job to say or assess that. I think people should just consider candidates on their merits and not have to triangulate. Like, is this guy worthy of coverage or not? Um, and I mean, we should remember. So while Biden, Sanders, and Warren either are or were all senators, of course, Biden vice president, Buttigieg, who performs, roughly the same in terms of um, um, news articles as Sanders and Warren, he's just the mayor of a relatively small town in the Midwest. So it seems like the media was, it that kind of I think refutes the idea that the media is just covering people um, with a lot of experience. Um, so I haven't been getting a lot of questions yet. You guys are obviously free to ask whatever you like, and I'll try my best to answer. I got one. I got one. Um, boom, which I assume is a Krasenstein reference. I guess it's good that you guys are talking, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Um, so yeah, that horse race process. But I mean, yeah, Buttigieg has gotten comparable news headlines as Sanders and Warren, so it's clearly not just that Sanders and Warren are senators. There, are appear to be other considerations in why you consider a candidate serious or not. And then, so moving on to kind of another part of the study, it also found, and this really surprised me, it found that um, that that the total number of page views by candidate actually was so Buttigieg had the second most page views through almost the entire study from January, and the data goes from January to mid June. Um, and that really surprised me because I had always perceived him as someone that got a lot of garnered a great deal of media attention, but was not necessarily super well known or extraordinarily popular among the Democratic base. I mean, that's the polling certainly would suggest that. And of course, by far and away, the most page views is for Biden, according to the study. And then under Biden and Buttigieg, they don't vary enormously. So you've got Warren, Sanders, Harris, and even Booker. Not enormously. I mean, there's differences for sure, but like Warren is obviously towards the top, and but Sanders is with the rest of them in terms of page views. So it seems like the news coverage, that's hard to know if that's because people are actually interested in that, or if that's just because that's what's getting reported, that's what people are clicking on. But it does seem to be having an effect. I would imagine, reporting mostly on one candidate is going to have an effect on what people. Um, yeah, I agree. Someone just commented, fascinating how much Beto has receded in the background. It's strange. You get these sort of figures that they bring on the news. I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a period when Buttigieg was just all over the place. He was on every TV show and all these headlines about him, all these stories. He speaks 7 languages. He served in Iraq. He's a Rhodes Scholar, blah, blah, blah. And I knew all of this personal stuff about him. And it has this kind of crescendo effect where you're like, whoa, this guy's really gaining momentum. And then boom, did he just disappear? And something about that just seems so um, artificial, because I can't imagine people are like really excited about someone and then just drop him immediately. I would assume that there's something behind that. Let's see, there's another person comments. It seems to me that polling shows that Biden is leading everything, but this person questioned sample sizes. I think that's exactly right. I mean, you can get very rough ideas at this point, but don't. This is still very early on in the game. Um, if we look at the Republicans at this point in the primary, I believe it was Rubio who was leading in 2015. So, I would exercise a lot of caution and humility in light of how wildly the polling ended up turning out versus, towards the end of the election in 2016 versus early on. So yeah, be skeptical, but for what it's worth, where we're at now, it does seem like a lot more media attention going to the former vice president. Well, thanks for joining me, guys. I appreciate the questions. I'm going to be doing this more regularly, so look for us here on TY.